So moving on to transportation. As you know, and we all appreciate, Magnolia sits in a unique physical position surrounded by water on three sides. And the one side that left is 15th, which is a major transportation corridor. It's no surprise to anyone. But the fun part of that is that there's now been this grand study taking place, the BERT study, that Ballard Interbay Regional Transportation Study. And that's as we understand it, the state and the city are working together to sort of analyze the whole system, where you have all the magic of that corridor, which is people, cars, buses, trucking, train system, future light rail system, and the port operations. And I think I've overlaid most of that. So with this BERT study coming out, we've gotten the impression that the BERT study may move forward the Armory Way as a very popular or attractive idea to the city council and the mayor. Our question to you is, I think you know this, and certainly it's our consensus, Magnolia only sees the most viable option is the one-to-one replacement. It's my understanding that Burlington Northern also sees that one-to-one as the only viable replacement, and the port sees it as the only viable replacement. So getting back to the BERT study, moving forward through city government, we're curious how you advocate for us, the stakeholders who live here, and that is so important to us, that although Armory may appear attractive to someone, we who live here do not see that attraction at all. So how will you advocate for that one-to-one replacement within the context of one idea sort of moving its way up the ladder when that idea is never going to work for us?
Yeah, so the Magnolia Bridge is something that I actually feel pretty optimistic about, like getting an in-kind replacement as the thing that we all start going forward on, because I do think it's going to, every time we have one of these studies, sometimes it's called one for one, sometimes it's called in kind, but same idea, is always the option that scores best on basically every metric except price. But even that is a little bit deceiving because, as you just talked about, Pat, like Burlington Northern and the Port of Seattle and a lot of our partners that we're working with, since they prefer it, I mean, they're also going to put in some resources. I mean, I've been talking to the Port of Seattle that owns the entire right-of-way that we would put an in-kind replacement of the bridge on. And the Port of Seattle is basically willing to make some kind of deal with us on the right-of-way. And if they do, I mean, that could potentially be savings of up to $50 million because that, if we paid fair market for the right-of-way, that's what it would cost. But if it's all public land owned by the port and they're willing to make a deal and they have a strong preference for the one for one as the option, it really starts making an impact on the bottom line. I think that the big thing that I've been doing is just talking really closely to the port, to Commissioner Steinbrook, to Senator Carlisle, who is an extremely dedicated supporter of the in-kind one for one as the option. We've just been making it clear that the only way that you're going to get support from the state and from the port, which is going to be essential for any replacement, is if it's the in-kind or the one for one. I think that we have a strong ally in this in the transportation chair, Councilmember Peterson, who has been a very supportive voice of taking a comprehensive look at all of our bridges in the city. The West Seattle Bridge has actually been a pretty good wake-up call because it really has shined a light on the poor level, the poor condition of a lot of the bridges in the city.
Yeah, because that was in my follow-up question. When you have a crisis like the West Seattle bridges, which there's a functionality there of multiple bridges, taking all the oxygen out of the room, how does Magnolia and our crisis that's developing, and Ballard Bridges, which is aging, which was closed just yesterday, again, for a period of time, this corridor being honored from Holman Road way north, 135th, all the way through Ballard, all the way through past Magnolia, Queen Anne, all the way out to West Seattle and beyond, that corridor being honored as a group would be a great angle to take, we think. So that one area say West Seattle Bridge doesn't take all of our attention and the mayor's pure focus and only emergency funds for that moment in time when we've been facing this moment for decades, we certainly appreciate you advocating. Or how do you see that linking?
Well, I think it is actually, I mean, I never want to say that the situation with the West Seattle Bridge has been helpful. I mean, it's been horrifying. I mean, it's absolutely terrible. I cannot imagine living in West Seattle right now without access to the bridge. But what it has done, sometimes if a problem gets bigger, it starts getting easier to solve it because it increases the sense of urgency and the drive to do something about it. And if you're gonna do something to patch up one bridge, it starts making sense to just expand it to, we're going to do a big project where we're just going to do a whole bunch of bridges in the city. It's going to be a big bridge measure, and we have this completely untapped resource in development impact fees that we've just never used before. It's actually an idea that I think the Seattle Times editorial board floated like 2 years ago. So, I think that, the West Seattle Bridge has basically been a spur to really get moving on focusing on bridges and doing some bigger work on getting the bridges going. So, I mean, that's what makes me optimistic on it, is there's been a lot more movement. People wouldn't be as concerned about the bridges if there hadn't just been this huge disaster in the failure of the West Seattle Bridge that it really, has made city officials look really keenly at this and say, oh, well, what if during the time it takes to replace the West Seattle Bridge, we have another bridge failure somewhere, and these just start multiplying and piling up. It's going to have a huge impact on freight mobility and public transit and just everything else. So I would just say that I think it has helped to focus everybody, only in the way that a disaster can sometimes. And I think that, it increases the chance that we'll get a big bridge district, and that the Magnolia Bridge, having been discussed so much over the last couple of years, will be on that project list. So that's my hope.
Great, thank you. And I appreciate how you will help them address the false argument that this is a Magnolia problem when it's so obviously linked to this web of transportation issues.